Hey, I'm Sam McCurdy and I'm a cinematographer. I like to use photography as references for work such as smoke. The big one for me, and it just so happened that Dennis was also a big fan of his, was Saul Lightner. And Saul had a way of photographing New York through barriers, through layers. Windows into cafes, into restaurants, out onto the street from inside. That was something we pushed whenever possible, was always to be photographing somebody through something else to create a bit of a fantasy element, but also to create a barrier between each of the real characters, their own characters, and the audience. A lot of Dennis's references were coming out of a very early kind of golden era of Hollywood cinema, which is French Connection. And for me, one of my favourite movies of that era was a movie called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, shot by Owen Roizman. It's a huge influence on me. It was cinematic, it was anamorphic, but it was almost documentary. There was a rush, there was an intensity with the handheld work and a composure to the static work that really resonated in terms of the feel of smoke.
You need to get somebody quick before one of them kills again.
Nobody's telling the truth in smoke. Everybody's dragging you down a garden path somewhere. The photography should reflect that. It needed to have really opposing colors, opposing contrast. Very, very dark against beautiful sunsets, huge skylines. Needed to have that balance so that you understood you were in a bit of a fantasy at all times.
If I suspected your husband of a crime, would that shock you? What crime would that be?
We develop rules so that we know when we can break them, so that we break them purposefully. The rules for smoke were pretty straightforward. No random movement for no reason. We wouldn't devise a movement for a camera if it didn't resonate or respond to what the characters were doing on screen. Never give the audience information that the characters on the screen aren't aware of. You can't just sit a wide shot and let the characters come into it and play out the scene. You have to come into that wide shot with your key character. Whenever possible, we would try and find a reflective surface, and the B camera or the C camera would shoot the entire scene in reflection, so it was always there as an option. These things were important for the directors that follow us, the cinematographers that follow us, so that the show in itself retains a sense of personality.
Fire isn't just an element. Fire is an organism. Fire watches. Fire waits.
We didn't want to spend a lot of time or a lot of money VFXing fire. We wanted to use the natural fire that we could. So we knew we'd need a sensor that could cope with the latitude, the dynamic range we were going to put the sensor through, which was going to be bright fire, but bright fire in dark situations. My personal choice was the Sony VENICE 2 sensor. In the very first tests we did, I was knocked out by how well the Sony sensor responded to the fire, even in completely underlit situations. I didn't need to overlight just to retain the intensity of the fire. The rich oranges, we didn't want it overexposing to the yellows and the whites. We wanted to retain that color so that it had a presence on screen. It needed to have its own character. I had a pretty good idea from the fun I'd had with Shogun on the VENICE 1. The show smoke was going to respond really, really well to the VENICE 2. I am a huge fan of the dual ISO on both the VENICE 1 and the VENICE 2. Smoke needed to be a dark show, so I didn't want that jump in base ISO to suddenly give me a lot of shadow detail. I needed just the right amount of shadow detail to betray the audience into thinking it was dark, but at the same time selling something in the shadows. So with the anamorphic lenses we chose for smoke and the VENICE 2 sensor, we started to really push the sensor to see where we could get it to in terms of its grain, its noise, its texture, to deliver that feel, not the look, but the feel of early Hollywood cinema.